3 months ago, you ended a relationship. It was difficult, but you tried to be respectful. You said the right things. You gave space. You thought it was over. Then your phone starts blowing up. Your mutual friends aren't returning calls. Your boss pulls you aside to ask about some concerning messages they received. Your social media is flooded with cryptic posts that everyone seems to understand except you and your ex. They're everywhere you look, telling a story about your relationship that you don't even recognize what happened. You didn't just end a relationship. You started a war, and you didn't even know you were enlisting. Welcome to the psychology of romantic revenge. This isn't about good people versus bad people. This isn't about men versus women. This is about what happens when love dies and something darker takes its place. Carl Jung said, "The shadow is that hidden part of ourselves we refuse to see." When a relationship ends, the shadow doesn't just emerge. IT declares war. And today, we're going into the trenches to understand why this happens, how it works, and most importantly, what you can do when you find yourself in the crossfire. Here's what most people don't understand revenge after. A breakup isn't random. IT's not irrational. IT follows patterns. Predictable patterns. And those patterns are rooted in the deepest parts of human psychology. The parts we inherited from our ancestors, the parts that kept us alive in tribes. The parts that modern society tells us to ignore but never actually disappear. Understanding these patterns is the difference between surviving the war and becoming another casualty. Let's start with the fundamental question. Why does rejection trigger warfare in the first place? Sigmund Freud gave us the answer over 100 years ago when he talked about the ego. The ego, Freud said, is the part of our mind that protects our sense of self. It's the guardian at the gate. And when rejection happens, the ego experiences what feels like a mortal threat, not just hurt feelings. Actual psychological death. Think about what a relationship does to your identity. You stop being just you. You become we. Your brain literally rewires itself. Your routines merge. Your goals align. Your future plans include another person. You build a life together. And then suddenly, one person decides it's over. What happens to the person who didn't choose the ending? Their entire identity shatters. The we becomes I again, but not the I they were before. A broken I. A rejected. Yan han, I that wasn't good enohe, understood this when, EW. Whoever fights monsters should see to it that in the process he does not become a monster. But what happens when the monster is inside you? What happens when rejection turns you into something you don't recognize? The answer is simple and terrifying. You stop fighting the monster. You become E-tears, what science tells us. When we experience romantic rejection, our brain processes IT the same way IT processes physical pain. The same neural pathways light up. The anterior cingulate cortex, the part of your brain that handles suffering, doesn't distinguish between a broken bone and a broken heart. IT's all just pain. But there's more. Add social humiliation to this equation. In our evolutionary past, being cast out from the group meant death. Exile was a death sentence. We're hardwired at a biological level to fear social rejection. When someone is rejected, especially if others know about it, IT triggers ancient survival mechanisms buried deep in the brain. Now here's where IT gets dark. The brain has two options when facing a mortal threat. Fight or flight. But you can't run from emotional pain. It's inside you. It follows you everywhere. So the only option left is fight. And that's where revenge is born. Not from evil. From survival instinct gone wrong. The person seeking revenge isn't thinking clearly. They're in survival mode. The prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for logic and long-term thinking, has been hijacked by the amygdala, the emotional center of the brain. They're operating on pure instinct now. And that instinct says one thing. Make them hurt the way you hurt. Carl Jung called this the inferior function. When our primary way of operating fails us, when our usual coping mechanisms break down, we regress. We fall back to our most primitive, undeveloped responses. The caring partner becomes the cold strategist. The loving person becomes the calculating destroyer. This isn't a choice. It's a psychological collapse. And in that collapsed state, revenge feels like the only way to regain power, to regain dignity, to regain self. Robert Greene writes in the 48 Laws of Power about wounded pride. He says wounded pride is more dangerous than a cornered animal. Because pride can't just bite and run. Pride needs to win. IT needs to dominate. IT needs the person who wounded IT to know they made a mistake. The revenge isn't about moving on. IT is about rewriting the narrative. About proving that the rejection was wrong. That the person who left made a terrible error. And the only way to prove that error is to make them suffer for it. Now let's talk about the weapons. Because revenge doesn't look the same for everyone. It adapts, it evolves, it defines the weak points and exploits them. And the most sophisticated weapon in the arsenal isn't violence. It's narrative. The story, Robert Greene teaches that perception is reality. If you control the story, you control everything. And after a breakup, the first battle is always for narrative control. Watch what happens in the days and weeks after a relationship ends. Someone starts telling their version of events. And that version has one purpose. To position them as the victim and you as the villain. This isn't always conscious. Sometimes people genuinely believe their revised history. Freud talked about something called retroactive inhibition. New emotions cause us to reinterpret old memories. When someone is hurt and angry, they look back at the relationship through a completely different lens. That vacation where you laughed together, they were actually miserable the whole time, but hiding IT. That gift you spent weeks planning, IT, was manipulative. A way to control them. That time you supported them through a crisis, you were love bombing to create dependence. Every positive memory gets reprocessed as negative. And the terrifying part, they believe this new version completely. Jung warned about this. He said people will do anything. Nitrogen monoxide matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. Facing their soul would mean acknowledging their part in what happened. Acknowledging that maybe the relationship failed for complex reasons. Maybe both people contributed to the problems. Maybe nobody is purely victim or purely villain. That's too painful. Too complicated, so the brain simplifies. You were always bad. They were always suffering. And now they're finally free to tell the truth. This narrative serves multiple purposes. First, IT protects their ego from the pain of rejection. If you were terrible, then being rejected by you isn't actually rejection. It's escape. It's liberation. Second, IT enlist allies. When they tell their story to friends, family, co-workers, those people become soldiers in the war. They didn't sign up for combat. They think they're supporting a friend through trauma. But they're now foot soldiers spreading the narrative. Third, and this is the most strategic part, IT preemptively destroys your credibility. If you try to defend yourself, you're gaslighting. If you try to tell your side, you're rewriting history. If you stay silent, your silence proves guilt. The narrative creates a trap where every move you make confirms the story. Plato wrote about the cave. Prisoners chained in darkness, watching shadows on the wall. Convinced the shadows are reality. The narrative your ex creates becomes the shadow that everyone believes is real. And you're screaming that it's just a shadow, but nobody's listening. They're too captivated by the story. Now let's talk about social media. This is where modern revenge reaches its most evolved form. The vague post, the cryptic quote, the carefully curated image of moving on. Every post is a missile aimed directly at you. And the genius of it, plausible deniability. They're not attacking you. They're just sharing their feelings. They're just living their life. They're just being authentic. But the timing of the posts, the content, the subtle references, it's all designed to be seen by you, to hurt you, to prove they're better off without you. Machiavelli wrote, "Everyone sees what you appear to be, if you experience what you really are." Social media is the ultimate appearance machine, the performance of happiness, the performance of thriving, the performance of how we moved on completely. Is the person actually happy? Maybe, maybe not. But that's not the point. The point is that you see IT. Every photo is a message. You are holding me back. Look how much better I am without you. You meant nothing. I've already replaced you. This triggers your ego precisely because it's designed to. If they're this happy, maybe you were the problem. If they're thriving, maybe you made a mistake. If they don't miss you at all, maybe you weren't as important as you thought. But here's the tell that most people miss. Truly happy people don't perform happiness. They just live IT. They don't need constant validation, don't need an audience. The performance itself reveals the pain underneath. Schopenhauer said we forfeit 3/4 of ourselves to be like other people. After a painful breakup, many people forfeit the last quarter too. They become entirely performant, entirely facade, and underneath, the same pain driving all the other revenge behaviors. The difference is, this weapon is built in protection. I'm not trying to hurt, THEM. I'm just posting about my life. But the frequency, the timing, the content choices, all of it tells a different story. The allies in the mob also play a crucial role. Machiavelli wrote about the importance of understanding the people around a ruler. In breakup warfare, look at who rallies around each person. The rejected party tells their story to close friends. Those friends are outraged on their behalf. They've only heard one side. They have nitrogen monoxide, reason to doubt IT. Those friends tell their partners who tell their friends. Each retelling loses nuance and gains certainty. By the time the story makes 3 jumps, you're not just a bad partner. You're a monster. Now we need to talk about the most painful weapon. Children. When kids are involved, breakup warfare reaches its darkest level. Because children aren't just caught in the crossfire. They become ammunition. Jung said the greatest tragedy is the unlived life of the parents, but there's something worse. When parents use children to live out their revenge. This doesn't happen overnight. It's subtle, gradual, insidious. And that's what makes IT so destructive. IT starts small. A sigh when the other parent's name comes up. A sad smile when the children come home from visitation, carefully worded questions. Did they seem happy? Do they talk about us? Do they have new friends? Each question plants a seed. The child's brain is wired to please the primary caregiver. Usually, the parent they live with most. The child depends on this person, reads their emotional climate every day. And children are brilliant at adaptation. They learn what makes that parent relax and what makes them tense. Talking positively about the other parent makes them tense. So, slowly, without even realizing it, the child stops doing it. They start reflecting the hurt parent's pain back to them. I don't want to go this weekend. They don't really listen to me. It's weird. There. Their hurt parent doesn't prompt these statements. They don't have to. The child is doing the psychological work for them, trying to ease their pain. Freud called this identification with the aggressor. The child aligns with the parent they perceive as wounded to gain safety. But the cost, the relationship with the other parent slowly erodes. And here's the cruelest part. It can't be proven. If you complain, you're being dramatic. If you fight back legally, you're being aggressive. If you try to talk to the children about it, you're manipulating them. The system catches obvious abuse. It doesn't catch subtle emotional manipulation. Years pass. The children grow up, believing a version of events that may not be true. And by the time they're old enough to think critically, the damage is often permanent. This pattern happens regardless of gender. Mothers, do I eat? Fathers, do I eat? IT's not about being male or female. IT's about being hurt and having access to the most powerful leverage that exists. Your children. The parent, who does this isn't necessarily evil. They're drowning in pain and grabbing onto anything that feels like control. But intention doesn't matter to the child who loses a parent, or to the parent who loses a child. This is custody. Battles become so vicious. IT's not really about time or money. It's about fear. Fear of being erased. Fear of being replaced. Fear of your children forgetting you, or worse, being taught to hate you. Let's shift down to something critical. The question nobody wants to ask. What if you're not the victim? What if you're the villain in this story? This is the part where most videos would skip ahead. Because people don't watch videos to be challenged. They watch to be validated. But we're going deeper. Because the truth is complicated. And the truth is this. Sometimes, the person claiming they're being punished actually did something worth punishing. Sometimes, the revenge is proportional to real harm. Sometimes the victim narrative is actually a shield to avoid accountability. Carl Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call faith. Here's the uncomfortable question. Are you willing to make your unconscious? Are you willing to look at your role honestly? Not what you intended, what you actually did. Because here's what most people miss. You can hurt someone badly without meaning to. You can violate their boundaries without realizing it. You can be emotionally abusive while thinking you're just being honest. And when they react to that harm, you might frame the reaction as irrational punishment. But is IT a proportional response to real damage you caused? Let me give you a framework. I call it the mirror test. 3 questions. Question 1. If you heard your behavior described by a stranger, would you think that person was in the wrong? Be honest. Remove yourself from the equation. If someone told you they treated their partner the way you treated yours, what would you think? Question 2. Have multiple people, independent of each other, told you similar things about your behavior? If your ex, your friends, your family, and your coworkers are all saying you have a problem with anger, or control, or dishonesty, maybe they're seeing something you're not. One person might be wrong. 5 people independently probably aren't. Question 3. Did you violate stated boundaries? This is specific. If your partner said, "Please don't do this thing," and you kept doing it, that's not a miscommunication. That's a choice to prioritize your wants over their boundaries. And when they leave because of that, their anger isn't punishment, it's consequence. These questions are hard. They require you to look at yourself without the protective filter of your ego. But this is how you break patterns. This is how you avoid becoming the villain in your next relationship too. So here's where we land. The path forward. What do you actually do when you're in the middle of breakup warfare? Whether you're the victim, the villain, or somewhere in between, you need a strategy. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." This is your foundation. Don't mirror the behavior. Don't fight fire with fire, because engaging is exactly what the revenge needs from you. Your anger proves you're the problem. Your defense proves you're guilty. Your counterattacks prove you're abusive. Your silence proves you're cold. You cannot win a rigged game by playing IT. So stop playing. This doesn't mean being passive. IT means being strategic. First, document everything. Not to use against them, but to protect yourself if things escalate. Keep records of communications. Save threatening messages. Log incidents that seem concerning, but do this quietly, systematically. Without drama. This is insurance, not ammunition. You're not building a case to destroy them. You're building protection in case you need to defend yourself legally. Second, establish boundaries and enforce them without emotion. Nitrogen monoxide responding to provocative messages. Nitrogen monoxide engaging with social media attacks. Nitrogen monoxide defending yourself. 2 mutual friends. Nitrogen monoxide explaining your side unless legally required. Every response feeds energy into a system that runs on your attention. Starve IT. Epictetus taught that we suffer not from events, but from our judgments about events. They can attack you. They can lie about you. They can turn people against you. These are events. Your judgment about these events determines whether they destroy you. If you judge that your reputation is your identity, you'll be destroyed when your reputation is damaged. If you judge that other people's opinions define your worth, you'll be destroyed when those opinions turn negative. But if you judge that your integrity is internal, not external, the attacks land differently. They still hurt, but they don't devastate. Third, focus ruthlessly on building your actual life, not performing your life. Real happiness doesn't need an audience. Real success doesn't need validation. Real peace doesn't need to be proven. Get professional help, not because you're broken, but because navigating this requires tools most people don't naturally have. A good therapist can help you process your anger, your hurt, and yes, your role in what happened. They can help you see patterns you're blind to. They can help you separate legitimate grievance from ego protection. If you have children, rebuild that relationship through consistency, not grand gestures. Show up, be present, be stable. Over time, truth has a way of emerging, but only if you're patient enough to let it. Kids are smart. They figure things out eventually, but they need to see who you actually are, not who you're accused of being. Work on your career. Invest in friendships that survive the war. Those are your real friends. Develop new skills. Exercise. Create. Build. Not to show your ex what they're missing. To show yourself who you're becoming. And here's the thing nobody tells you. The revenge will end. Either because they exhaust themselves, or because they finally grieve what they lost, or because you become so boring to attack that they lose interest. IT doesn't matter which. What matters is who you are. When IT ends, are you still standing? Are you still sane? Are you still capable of trust and openness and love? Or did you become the thing you were accused of being? That's the choice. Nietzsche said, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." Your why can't be proving them wrong. That's still giving them power over you. Your why has to be internal. Building a life worth living. Becoming someone you respect. Breaking whatever patterns led you here. Now the final piece. Forgiveness. Not for them. For you. Jordan Peterson talks about resentment as drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. Holding on to the anger, the bitterness, the need for vindication. IT doesn't hurt them. IT hurts you. IT keeps you chained to a past you can't change. Forgiveness doesn't mean what they did was okay. It doesn't mean you have to reconcile. IT doesn't mean you forget. IT means you stop letting IT control your present, you acknowledge what happened, you learn from it, and then you let the emotional charge drain away. This takes time. Years, maybe, but the alternative is worse. The alternative is building your entire identity around being the victim or the villain of someone else's story, and that's nitrogen monoxide way to live. Carl Jung said near the end of his life, "I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become." This is your moment of choice. The breakup happened. The war happened. The damage happened. You can't control that. But you can control what you become in response to it. You can become bitter, angry, obsessed with justice. Or you can become wiser, stronger, more careful about who you let close. The choice is yours. Choose carefully. Your future self is watching.